Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to DreamWorks Switch to Life. And for today's video, we're going to be reviewing my favorite TV show that happens to be based on a movie. That, of course, being Dragons Race to the Edge. And obviously it's my favorite, so you know that it's gonna be good. But the things that make it good are awesome, especially the animation. While there are definitely some mistakes and it's definitely made with a TV show budget, the fact is that the animators took a lot of time and care, not only in the characters' designs, but also in the way that the show works, the way the characters move. They actually look like they're in a movie rather than a low-budget TV show, which is amazing. Not to mention, they bring back a lot of the voice actors that you would find back in the original series, from the movie actors of Hiccup, Astrid, Tuffna, and Fishlegs to the rest of the TV show actors. Literally, every single character from Dragons, Riders of Berk, and Defenders of Berk shows up again here. By the way, I should probably point out that you need to have watched both Riders and Defenders of Berk in order to understand the characters of Race to the Edge. But what really makes this show awesome is the fact that it's way better than Riders and Defenders of Berk. Again, the animation, total upgrade. But above all else, the thing that really makes this stand out is the overall story. Unlike Riders of Berk, where it was just the kids going on their own adventures, and Defenders of Berk, which technically had an overarching plot, but the episodes didn't really move the story forward, in this show, almost every single episode adds something to the overall story. Even episodes that don't feel like they're going to add much to the story end up actually being important later on, and that's really awesome. And another thing that I want to mention, this show was so good that it was only intended to get 52 episodes, but Netflix decided to renew the series for an additional 2 seasons, so we got 78 episodes over the course of 6 seasons, and that is really awesome, especially because I enjoyed the entire show the whole way through. It was awesome. Of course, the things that really make this show awesome is the story. Granted, while the overall story happens over the course of 78 episodes, most of those episodes are just filler. They have their own plot going on, but they almost always add something to the overall story that makes the entire episode necessary. Another thing that makes this show awesome is its darker tone. It's not as dark as you might expect, for obvious reasons, since this is targeted towards kids, but it dives into a bunch of adult themes. For instance, in one particular episode, Astrid actually goes blind, and we see her have to learn to cope with it, and that's really awesome. A lot of the episodes are like that, but that one is my particular favorite example to show off here. But obviously the best part of this series is the dragons and the world building that comes with it. Seriously, this dragon series introduces us to almost 50 different species on the list, and that is really awesome, and I love it. And the thing is, every single one of these dragon species has something that makes them stand out and be unique from every other dragon species. And I also loved the way that they made the dragons behave, because I don't know, they made them seem like actual animals, but at the same time, they also gave them real-life emotions that you would expect to find in humans, and that's really awesome. But of course, again, the best part of the series is the story, which we're going to dive into right now. Race to the Edge takes place 3.5 years since the original movie, or 3 years since the end of Defenders of Berk, and 1.5 years before How to Train Your Dragon 2, which basically means that in the 18th months leading up to How to Train Your Dragon 2, every season of Race to the Edge takes place over the course of roughly 3 months. The series starts when Dagger the Deranged escapes from prison. He's the main antagonist of the Defenders of Berk TV show. And after that, Hiccup and the gang go on an adventure to try to track him down, and that takes them to the edge of the archipelago, where they not only discover a bunch of new dragons, but they also try to thwart Dagger in getting the Dragon Eye, which is an artifact created by ancient dragon hunters. And it's really weird because it's like super advanced technology compared to what the Vikings used, but again, it's supposed to be ancient technology, so it's kind of weird, but at the same time, kind of cool. Anyway, the first season is mostly just filler episodes after getting done with the plot. But of course, during the season, we are reintroduced to Heather, who was a character first featured in Riders of Berk. And I gotta say that I really loved her character. But above all else, I loved her story, which is apparently that she was sent adrift by Dagger the Deranged when she was just a kid. And since then, she's been trying to get revenge against him. But then it's revealed that Dagger is actually her brother, and she is his long-lost sister. Now, obviously, that sounds kind of weird, but it gets better, because on to season 2, where it's revealed that there are actually descendants of those original dragon hunters who are still hunting dragons to this day, and they are being led by Riker, who is actually a really big enthusiast of dragon hunting. Seriously, this guy is so evil. He literally captures, kills, tortures, and pretty much does anything you can imagine to any dragon that he finds. And it's not just for the money, he actually enjoys doing it. And that's really weird. And it's really awesome. But not as awesome as his brother, who happens to be the head of the entire operation, Vigo Grimborn. Now, with Vigo, he's not really into doing any of the actual hunting himself, but he's more of a game master. Seriously, everything to this guy is a game. If you are trying to go up against him, he views you as his chess opponent, and that's pretty much it. Everything is a game to this guy, but the thing is, he is actually extremely smart, and he knows what he's doing. While he never actually does anything hands-on himself, he manages to lead the dragon hunters to the point where they're an actual legitimate threat. More so than Drago Bloodvis or even Grimmel the Grizzly, which is really saying something. And the best part of all is that Dagger the Deranged is working with the dragon hunters, and so is Heather, because apparently Heather wants to be with her brother, which I guess makes sense. But by the end of season 2, Vigo, who is extremely smart, manages to figure out that Heather is a spy, captures her, and then uses her capture to lure in the dragon rider so that he can take the dragon eye away. At the same time, Dagger, who had actually become relatively close with his new sister, decides to actually go and rescue her. And the season ends with Vigo and Riker getting the dragon eye, and with it, knowledge of all dragons in existence. And at the same time, Heather and Dagger end up going missing, and they return in season 3 when Dagger actually has a bit of a redemption arc, which I kind of found to be a little weird, but at the same time, it's believable.
I've been alone on this island for months. You know, it's amazing what a near-death experience in hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of alone time will do to the mind, body, and soul hiccup.
Because here's the thing, Dagger, he's always been looking out for numero uno, and that's it. But as soon as Heather entered the picture, his whole perspective changed. He's no longer self-centered, he's actually trying to do what's best for his family, and because of that, he's actually on a path of redemption, and that's really good. As the season progresses, Heather actually joins up with the Dragon Riders, and I actually want to say something here. In the movies, we see that by the time the third movie takes place, Fishlegs ends up with Roughnut, which, don't get me wrong, I'm happy for them, but at the same time, Heather and Fishlegs made a way better couple than Roughnut and Fishlegs ever did. And that's really saying something. If anything, Roughnut should have ended up with Snotlout, because those two are way more alike than you might think. Throughout the season, we see Hiccup and the Dragon Riders fight off against Vigo and the Dragon Hunters, and eventually Vigo stops seeing it as a game and more as a full-on war. But more importantly, I love what Vigo is doing to Hiccup. He's actually causing Hiccup to grow into a leader, and he's causing him to feel stress and anxiety, forcing him to rethink every single one of his plans. and I just love that. But way more importantly, I love the emotional toll that it's taking on Hiccup. Which brings me to another point. I really love the emotions of these characters because every single one of those episodes has something going on with the character, whether it be Hiccup or one of the Dragon Riders or even a fellow ally like Dagger the Deranged, who actually ends up training his own dragon named Shattermaster in season 3. But then at the end of season 3, there's an auction that takes place, and at the end of the auction, Vigo actually manages to take all of Burke's gold for himself, which is really bad because it actually sends Burke into a state of poverty for the majority of season 4. And while we really don't see much of that, we do see that there is definitely a toll that it takes on Stoic the Vast. As season 4 progresses, Hiccup and the Dragon Riders keep fighting against Vigo, and they eventually manage to find the gold along with all of Vigo's gold, which they take for themselves, not only crippling the Dragon Hunter Empire, but at the same time getting Burke out of poverty, and they give some to Heather and Dagger, who end up going off on their own to rebuild the Berserker tribe on Berserker Island after their chief, Dagger, was thrown in prison for 3 years. And then comes the season 4 finale, which would have been the end of the series. It is a final battle between Hiccup, Riker, and Vigo, and it's really awesome because Riker and Vigo are no longer working together, and both of them are actually trying to manipulate Hiccup into being manipulated so that they can use him and find a way to destroy him using a brand new weapon called Project Shellfire, which is actually a massive sea dragon being controlled by the Dragon Hunters, which can destroy most islands, and that's really awesome. But what I really love about this is that there were actual consequences in the final battle. Obviously not to our Dragon Riders, but more to Dagger and Shattermaster, because in this case, Shattermaster actually broke his wing in the battle, and it's not repairable. He literally can no longer fly for the rest of his life. But luckily, Dagger manages to make a new friend in the form of a triple strike that he later names Sleuther. And then the season ends with Riker being killed by the Summer Ripper, which is a sea dragon that was brought to take down the Shellfire. And Vigo actually falls into a volcano after Hiccup willingly tosses the Dragon Eye into it. And that's pretty much how the season and the series would have ended if it weren't for the fact that Netflix renewed it for 2 more seasons, so introduced the season 5 villain, Krogan. Krogan is actually not exclusive to season 5. He was played as a character all the way back in season 3. Granted, he was just a minor background character then, and he became a major character in a single episode of season 4 where he tried to become a bounty hunter and collect Hiccup's bounty. But then in season 5, he takes on the main role. And the thing is, he takes over the Dragon Hunter Empire in Vigo's absence, and he starts by training a brand new group of hunters called the Dragon Flyers. These guys literally chain and muzzle Singe Tails, which are probably one of the most powerful common dragons that there are. And they literally force these Singe Tails to carry the Dragon Hunters into battle, making it impossible for Hiccup and Toothless to fight against these new Dragon Hunters, because obviously it's not like the Singe Tails want to actually destroy the Dragon Riders. They're just being forced into servitude. Well, all except for the Titan Singetail, which is being ridden by Krogan. And the thing is, Krogan and the Titan Singetail actually have a legitimate bond of friendship. And that's really saying something because Krogan is a dragon hunter who is trying to capture and kill and torture as many dragons as he wants, but at the same time, he has his own dragon that he actually cares for. Or at the very least, the dragon cares for him. And then later in the season, it's revealed that Vigo is actually alive, and he comes up with the plan to work with Krogan, and they end up going back to Dragon's Edge, where they go into the volcano where the Dragon Eye was thrown. And the thing is, the Dragon Eye cannot be destroyed by any kind of heat whatsoever. So Vigo knows that the Dragon Eye is still there, and he actually manages to get it back from the volcano. As the season progresses, the Dragon Riders manage to discover a brand new island called Vanaheim, which is actually the resting place of all dragons. It's where they go to die and are eventually buried. Well, all dragons except for Night Furies for some strange reason, but it also happens to be the resting place for Oswald the Agreeable, Dagger and Heather's father, who was lost at sea and forced Dagger to rise to the occasion, at which point he ended up becoming chief of the Berserkers in Oswald's absence. But unfortunately, when doing that, Dagger didn't even bother trying to send out a search party to look for Oswald. He just assumed the position of chief, and he regrets that decision because he had the chance to actually rescue Oswald when he shipwrecked on the island of Vanaheim. Oswald managed to live a good life where he ended up discovering a lot about dragons until he died, and eventually he wrote a letter to his offspring that when they would eventually discover his resting place, they would find the letters and know that he loved them and tried to get back to them every day of his life.
But I'm confident you took good care of her and protected her from the evils that lurk in the archipelago. Oh, we got that one wrong.
But I actually have a theory of how he was even shipwrecked to begin with. Turns out that he happened to give two very special objects, Dragon Eye lenses, to his children. One he gave to Heather, one he gave to Dagger, and these Dragon Eye lenses are extremely special because they actually point the direction to the King of Dragons, which is the long life goal of the Season 6 villain, Traitor Johann. Now, I haven't mentioned him before, but he's a character who is working with the Dragon Riders throughout the entirety of the series. He was first introduced back in Riders of Berk episode 9. And the thing is, Johann is not just a traitor, he's a traitor. My theory is that he was trying to get the Dragon Eye lenses from Oswald the Agreeable, but since Oswald actually gave them to his children, Johann couldn't do anything about it, so he forced Oswald to be shipwrecked to make it a little bit easier to get the Dragon Eye lenses from Dagger and Heather. But of course, they're resilient to the point where it took literal years for Johann to actually find a solution where he could actually get one of the lenses from Heather. And of course, Dagger has the other lens.
It's not like you have another Dragon Eye laying around. You have another Dragon Eye laying around. Of course he does.
Which is good because Hiccup has been building his own Dragon Eye, which he calls the Dragon Eye 2 for some strange reason. Oh, another thing that I really want to mention, this series also showcases Hiccup as an inventor. He ends up inventing a lot of things that we see him use throughout the series, and of course, things that would eventually lead to the tools that he would use in the second movie, which includes a dragon shield, which can also be turned into a catapult, and a bunch of other functionalities, a fire sword, which he calls Inferno, which he would eventually turn into the weapon he would use in the second movie, and of course, his flight suit. He goes through many different iterations of it until eventually it's destroyed in the series finale and he creates a new one for the second movie. Anyway, back to the story. As season 6 progresses, both the Dragon Riders and the Dragon Flyers are trying to collect as many Dragon Eye lenses as possible so that they can find a way to track down the King of Dragons. And in the series finale, they managed to do just that. They track down a former King of Dragons in the Bewilderbeast, which just so happens to be living on Berserker Island. And eventually the Dragon Riders and Flyers have a climactic battle, and by the end of the series, Traitor Johann actually dies. Vigo actually decides to have a bit of humility and sacrifices himself to save Hiccup from the Dragon Flyers earlier in the season. And the thing is, Krogan the main villain of season 5, is actually still alive, and it turns out he's working for none other than Drago Bloodfist. At which point, because he didn't return with the King of Dragons, Drago actually ends up killing Krogan. It's also revealed that the King of Dragons actually has a offspring in a dragon egg, at which point the Dragon Riders give it to a trusted friend, who give it to a trusted friend, which is actually Valka. And no, this is definitely not the wildebeest that shows up in How to Train Your Dragon 2, as that would be impossible. But the fact of the matter is that Valka has a bewilderbeast egg that we don't ever see in either of the following movies, which is really weird. But, I mean, it makes sense. Why would the movies ever acknowledge the TV show's existence? And that is the end of the story. And I gotta say that I really loved the story, especially because of the emotional characters and the ways that they grow up. For instance, we see how Hiccup has matured into a leader and why he actually deserves to become the next chief by the time the second movie takes place. We see how Astrid has become a warrior that has learned to get in touch with her softer side and eventually manages to actually try to start dating Hiccup. Which is kind of weird because the series actually treats it like this is the first time they've ever had romantic interest in each other, and yet it's obvious that in the first movie they had romantic interest in each other. So again, kind of weird. And then there's Fishlakes, who doesn't really get a lot of emotional development, but he does get a chance to get in touch with his stronger side. And then there's the twins, who get actually a lot of screen time dedicated to them, not only as comic relief and the funny guys, but also because they actually have some emotional characteristics. For instance, they both love and hate each other. They are both extremely smart in very weird ways, and of course, they just so happen to be extremely funny. At the same time, they also have their own character development, though it varies depending on which episode you're watching. But the main character who I really loved his character development for is Snotlout. Throughout this series, we see Snotlout being extremely arrogant and thinks he should be in charge because, well, he's technically, but not really, the fourth in line for the chief of Burke, and as you know, the next chief in line is Hiccup, but being Hiccup's cousin, Snotlout feels like he should become the next leader, even though he doesn't have the qualities that make a leader. And eventually, we do see him go through some character development that makes it so that he realizes he's not meant to be a leader, he's meant to be a follower. And despite how much he hates Hiccup, he ends up following him every step of the way later in the series.
I don't know. Just do what he says. He's always right, so there's really no point.
What was that, Snotlout? You're like a ray of light, lighting my way. Super shiny. Never mind.
And that is the end of my review. Overall, Dragon's Race to the Edge is definitely a series worth watching. However, again, you might want to check out Riders and Defenders of Burke first because then you get a lot more out of the story. At the same time, it's not necessary to understand the plot of Race to the Edge. And while I do hate to say it, I believe that this series might actually be 100 times better than the third How to Train Your Dragon movie. Not as good as the first or second, for obvious reasons, but still really awesome. And I gotta say that if you haven't seen this series, I highly recommend that you do. But what did you guys think of this series? Make sure to leave some of your thoughts down below in the comments section. And bonus question, what is your favorite dragon from the How to Train Your Dragon series? Make sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up to date on all things DreamWorks, including when I post my review for How to Train Your Dragon 2, which will go live this Friday. With that in mind, I hope that you're all staying safe out there, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.
It could really be anybody. I mean, except us, of course.
Of course.
Make your move, turncoat.
Just what a provocateur would say.
Provocateur. Good word. Well used.
My Thor, that descended into the absurd rather quickly.
Actually, it took longer than I expected.